welcome back to the second video of the episode 1 of the first version of the development type of Galactic Cruise. We're glad that you hopefully enjoyed the first one because you're watching this one. Yeah, we decided we thought we might want to break them up a little bit so they're not so long, maybe kind of keep us from just rambling. But like we mentioned earlier, we are going to jump into what launching a shuttle looks like. Hit the tech track, and I know we said we'd come back to those cue cards because that was quite an interesting history of the game. Yeah, and if you're watching and you haven't played this game yet and want to play it, number one, it's a lot better than what you see here, I promise. Like I said in the first video, I think we're on version 87 or something like that. But we do have a Facebook page, Discord, that'll be linked in the comments or linked below the video that you can join us, and we'd love to have you playtest if you're watching this at least prior to our Kickstarter launch or GameFound launch, wherever we decide to go. And if this is way after the fact, then we just hope you love the look back at the history, the development of this game. And also feel free to drop some comments. Tell us what you like, things you think we should have kept, or things that you're glad we changed. So, yeah, let's launch a shuttle, Koltin.
Let's launch it.
First,
yeah, so this one says that I have. Yeah, it says I got to send a supervisor here to launch a shuttle.
Right, there were.
And
we did have phases, right? But you had to send an order to launch. So real quick, because we skipped over this, kind of like the order of play. We had revealed a cue card that we said we'll look at. Update the waiting list, which is player count. Conduct staff meeting, which is this area here, which is quite interesting. Place workers, advance flights. So those two have stayed. And then the food drive, which we'll come back to. Which is great. The food drive, what a wonderful idea. Okay. Yeah, so let's build a shuttle here and launch it. I'm gonna grab some shuttle segment pieces, maybe some that match, some that don't match.
I'll grab a engine.
Oh, well, I was gonna do the one beside the player board here since we already got like.
Oh. You just did.
Let me just do this here. So we actually got some rooms. I think I'll get a little wieldy. Though, we do need some guests, right? Because we looked at an action earlier that would let you seat guests. So throughout the game, these dice would come out here, right? Each round, these dice would come out here and they would be rolled, and every round they would move down. There are 4 colors in here, contrary to what's happening. And these would just kind of cycle down throughout the game. And we had a weird system here. God, are they all just, maybe they're just not shuffled.
I think there's coming out in order.
Yeah. I'm used to using a random bag for the stuff that we have now. I guess this was before I knew about those things. So interestingly enough, for some reason, we paired the color with the number of months and the number with the type of room, which later we realized was a stupid idea because it made sense to pair a number with a number. We'll eventually get there, but here's what we got here's what we're working with. We've got 3 different durations based on the color of the die, and the number represents the type of room that they want to sleep in. And so as you can see in the shuttle here, I've got a card with the suite rooms and interior rooms. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the interior rooms had 4 spots for dice. The window rooms had 3 spots for dice, and the suites had 2.
3. Yeah.
And so they were more expensive and had less spots, but you could put a higher value dice in, right?
Yeah. And you would get points per die put
that's
there.
Right.
So you could max out 4, 6, and 8.
Yeah. And so, because the value 1s and 2s could only go in the interiors. So if you filled up an interior with 2s, you would get 8. And then a suite could have 6s, so you could technically get up to 12 value dice, in a suite, right? But I'm gonna grab.
But did the numbers matter at this point?
I
Like
don't
for
remember.
points?
We'll get there. We'll figure it out. But then the color was the duration, right? And so the guest forced you to fly on a duration they want to fly on, which is thematic. I mean, I think all of this is thematic. It just wasn't executed very well. But once the dice got down to this row, it meant they would fly in any room. So basically, their number didn't matter, right? So you could put like a 6 in an interior room, and then if they made it down here, any length didn't matter. And I don't know. We went back and forth many versions. Sometimes it was compounding, right? It was both. Sometimes it was either or.
I'm almost 100% certain in this first version they did compound.
So like, this was basically could go anywhere. Didn't matter. Color or number. Yeah.
Anywhere at all.
So for our example here, we're just going to take it and put it in here, and I'll take another one, and we'll just call it a day. I think the action to take those though lets you take as many as you wanted, right? As many as you had spots for, because it just said seat guests. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yes, I think that's right.
So this is what a shuttle would look like. We walked through what testing it would look like. So you did have to test it. That was a requirement. It had to be tested. And then I think, you send your supervisor to that launch action, and then you would launch. And so we'll look at what launching looks like. I think it's over here, right? This is the cost. So you've got one food per guest, which is exactly what it is now, which is cool. Plus the month requirement. We'll come back to that in a second. Oxygen per inner segment, which is exactly what we have now. And fuel equal to the duration, which is exactly what we have now, though it's shifted quite a bit throughout. But this was per month, right? So your fuel cost was either 3, 6, 9, or 12. And so if you wanted to do the longest flight, you'd have to spend 12 fuel, which is...
And you can only ever hold 9.
You can only ever hold
9.
Which, that's... I mean...
Which meant you had to, because we didn't have agenda cards at the time.
Oh, that's
which means
right.
you had to have both of these flipped, and you had to upgrade your...
I totally forgot that you could
shuttle.
upgrade your shuttle, right? Because if you upgraded
Right,
your engine,
or-
your engines is what gave you a fuel discount. And if you upgraded your cockpit, it gave you nothing in this version. It gives you something at some point. But yeah, so in order to get 12, you literally had to do that, and had to do that, which means you had to get lucky on the die rolls. Because I think only one side had that fuel.
Yep, only one side.
So, good luck launching a 12-month flight. Like I said, we had a per month requirement. So, we'll come up here on the main board. We'll look at that. So this is what I think is thematic, and I've thought a lot about trying to bring this back into the game. We've talked about it many times, but it's just one of those cases where it's more fun and interesting and mechanically sound to let the mechanics win over the theme in this case. But here you would pay, one food per guest, one oxygen per segment for a 3-month. But a 6-month you also had to pay an extra oxygen and an extra food. So that meant not just based on your size and capacity, but because it was longer, it also required more food and more oxygen, which is super thematic, right? And up to 12 months, you had to do an additional 3 and an additional 3. But we just found that, when you were calculating the cost, because you were already spending 6 or 9 fuel and 4 or 5 oxygen, and, you could have, what, 8, 10 guests in your shuttle. You're dropping 30 to 40 resources at one time. And so to add this little extra that you also had to calculate was just mind-numbing, right? It was so difficult to calculate what you had to do. But it was thematic.
Don't worry, the math will get harder.
The math will get harder. And this is why we often sometimes classify it as a flight simulation. It's not like a legit flight simulation, right? But it was so thematic that it felt kind of like it, So once you pay the cost, right? So looking here, right, we'd pay 2 food, we'd pay 3 oxygen, and then if we did a 3-month refuel. And then we would score, right? So now that's this over here, right? So what's interesting,
Yeah.
why don't you tell people what's interesting about this scoring, this first scoring step here, or what it says at the top?
Oh, you can take points for millions of dollars. Like, whatever this total ends up, you could split that anyway, which is TK's favorite thing in the world, is choosing between points and millions for things.
I enjoy that. But it just, I don't know, like, why didn't it work? It did, like...
Well, it's a...
Like, it shifts, it's just, like, the game, the time of the game tells you, right? Like, early game, you're most likely going to take mostly money.
Right.
Late game, you're mostly going to take points. And so it becomes very uninteresting automatically.
Well, and then for people who were playing this for the first time, like, that's another choice that you're giving players.
Like, well, I don't know.
That already don't really know
right. So what they're doing. Split it down the middle, right? Or take all points, or like it just slows the game down like crazy. Yeah. So walk us through the rest of the scoring there.
Yeah. So you would get points from the diamond or from the stars and shuttle segments, which included halves, which I think we rounded down.
So. I don't remember. I don't know why we did halves.
Yeah. So like this currently would have 1, 2, 3.5. Nothing, because there's nothing here.
Oh, that's right. That's what you were saying earlier. It's 4 stars per guest. So, like, if you had 2 guests here, you would get 8 stars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's going to give you another 2, so that's what? 5.5. 7.5 here. So 7 points from your stars. Points equal to month. This is a 3-month. That would be a total of 10. Match segment. So like right here where these two
that's where those bars
things match. Yep. And that was just 1 point because like this segment matches this segment. And then depending on what flight card we played with it would determine the...
Yeah, so whenever you took that action to like play your flight card, I believe we just played it down here.
I think that's right.
And so like... So I guess you didn't have to meet any criteria. Like, you could literally launch, right, without it. Because you would just get 0 points. It would make, like... Right?
I think you still had to meet one, but if you only met one, it was 0 points.
Right. Yeah, so you either had to hit 9 months...
Brutal.
Had to have 1 food and 1 activity. Which is crazy, because the cards that you wanted for the dice never had a... Though some, I think there are some in here that told you, like, right, they wanted an interior room or they wanted a suite.
Yes, it was almost like a 4th.
Right. Yep.
Like
yep.
room type.
And then stars. Yeah. And so let's look at what happens when you launch. So you pay the resources, you score all your points, choose if you want points or millions, and then what happens is. I don't think you did anything with your shuttle. I think it stayed here, right? It stayed
here. Yep.
And this is interesting. So for a long time in the game, we had hangars, right? As you can see down here, there's a card, and so one of the places you could build a development was on a hangar, and that would give you another hangar card, right? And so this determined how many shuttles you could work on, which is also another really cool thematic thing. It's right. It's like you're going to invest in building a hangar to build more shuttles, or a launch pad, is I think what we ended up calling it, because that's what it was. And so what happened when you launched a shuttle from that launch pad, the token from it went on the flight card on the duration that you did. So if you did a 9-month, it would go here. And this is how we tracked. No, it wasn't. We used these guys to track. I think that this came later. Yeah, what I'm describing here came later, I believe. So we'll jump to these tokens. So this was basically I think you could have 4 shuttles launched at a time. So whenever you launch a shuttle, you take these tokens. Oh yeah, okay, I remember. You put the flag card up here at the very top, and then you pointed this at the duration. Is that right? Because
Well, now
you've
I
got
can't
2
remember.
tokens here, and one's going to go over here on this duration track.
I'm kind of thinking that one of them went like right here or
I think
something,
you're right.
and you put a worker on
Yep,
top
I
of it.
think we just
It was a little
it
messy.
was a little messy. Yeah, I think you did put it there, and you did have to pilot it, right? But I think the card says, it's sideways here. Send a worker or pay the months in millions minus 3. So if you were doing a 9-month, you'd pay 6 million to basically have an autopilot here. And so, yeah, but the second token went up here to our durations. And so I don't know if you want to talk about what's going on here with the durations.
Okay, so this flights in progress, if I'm remembering correctly, you set your arrow to whatever was listed here. So for a 12-month, it would face straight up like so. A 9-month would be rotated, and each round, it came down, but it kept its.
Right.
I think it kept its orientation so you could remember what it was
Correct.
to begin with. Because when it dropped down here, it kind of was held hostage until you paid to clean and repair it, which was going to be 1, 2, 3, or 5 million, depending on the duration it came from.
That's another like thematic thing where it's like, yeah, when it lands, like you need to clean it, fix anything. But it just wasn't fun.
Yes.
It kept your shuttles locked up and.
Yeah. Well, because we were making players pay for a ton of stuff, and then it's like, and here's just another thing to pay for.
Yep. Yeah, so that was
as cool.
That
was
the launching process. Quite invasive. Invasive, probably not the right word. Overwhelming. A lot of cost to pay, especially with the duration extras. A lot of things to score and things to choose, plus a lot of tokens to move around. And yeah, cool. All right, well, yeah. So what, you want to jump to the tech track? Talk about it. And then we can hit the cue card and staff meeting as kind of a way to wrap it up.
Yeah, sounds good. The tech track is my favorite thing that doesn't exist anymore. So there are still technologies in the game, but how it worked initially is you would come up here and you would you'd place a worker, and you could either basically advance once on this track, or you could pay 2 million, basically move up 3 spaces, which would at least on the first round take you all the way up to the top of a
like
what do we call these things? Like levels, I guess.
Yeah,
a tier.
Yeah. Probably
better. But the other action here is you would pay the cost. So it was 3 million, then 7, then 12, then 20 million. Was it just a blind off the top? Did you get to look through all of them?
That's a good question. It could have been a draw 3, choose 1. There's also no benefit to building a development up here. I think I forgot to put one. So that may help.
I do think
once we see that, how it makes it better.
I'm sure even probably even version 2. I'm sure if we.
So.
But yeah, technologies. You however it worked, whether it was you drew 3 or you have to look at all of them.
These were interesting. Maybe we'll look at a couple here.
Yeah, so let's say I chose this one. It would go in wherever my tech level was, and I would get to place. You have to place a development
That's
from your
right.
board
I forgot
or
about that.
building at the
Yeah,
time.
so basically it's another way to remove developments, right? You can build developments from a construction site action, or you can invent a tech, which removes the leftmost from
Yes.
any row. I believe is what it was.
Yes, which is kind of still what we do for technology, because like when you build a
Yep.
development
It can
in
just
the
go
current
there.
game, you can build it
Yep.
onto a.
Right.
Yeah, and then what was neat here is that, so if let's say this was, Yellow's technology, is that Yellow had access to this, and if I'm not mistaken, if Green was
Yep.
at
This
the
or
top
higher.
of this or higher, they had
Correct.
access to it
For
as
free.
well.
Which will play a big part
Yep.
into later versions.
Yes. And then this says only if player is not at this text top. So basically, once everyone hit the top, then it was obsolete.
Yeah, which is cool. Like that's a cool mechanic. You know, because like you could
That was
stay
a cool
below and not have access to it, and everybody's using it. But if you're the last one to reach here, it becomes obsolete. You get rid of it. Like that's quite interesting.
Yes,
We'll
that
have
was
to use
cool.
somewhere.
Yes, and these actually had some really neat things, like
Right.
gain a food when another player uses the kitchen. Now, the problem that we ran into here is people would build this technology and then
Yep.
forget it was there, and then it would be the middle of 2 rounds later, and they would say, "Oh, I forgot I had this," and then we did that thing where you say, "Well, just take 2 food if you think that sounds fair," and then
Stay put.
now, yeah, it's like that one there is about the same as it always has
We
been.
got a couple like that.
Yeah, like the fewer things, and also this could be 1 per player per
row. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Here, so I basically in a 2-player game, we could each have 1 out here, which meant in a 4 or 5-player game, because this at one point went to 5 players, you would have technology that were
a 2-player.
all the way.
Well, I guess 4 plus, so 5-player, but we only had 2. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, man, this is a great system, and it gets even better.
It really does. This was the. I've not cried yet in the development of this game, but if I was going to cry over anything, it was us getting rid of this, because man, it was good. Now and then these points were just end of game if you just got the highest one you would reach. And was that same with the points that you uncovered?
I think you got that during. No, yeah, you're right. Yeah, because there's no production phase.
Or was it just immediate?
It was either immediate or end game. Either way, I mean, it would result in the same amount of points.
Right.
So yeah, you could get, quite a bit of points here. Because what's interesting though, like now our resources are very equal, right? I mean, they ebb and flow based on what you need and what you're building towards. So like,
sure,
they're like per player differently valued, right? If I'm building a lot of small shuttles, I want to focus on fuel. If I'm building, a big shuttle and I want to send it out a lot, I'm focusing on oxygen, And so, but here it was like fuel's most important, then oxygen, then food, which is why we have a food drive. And so to wrap this up, why don't we jump up here to our cue card?
Yes, let's
go over it. So each round, as you can see by the order of play here, first thing we would do is we would reveal a cue card, almost like an event for the round. And I think each round was considered 3 months, right? Because the durations were 3, 6, 9, 12. So basically,
yes.
And the reason these were called cue cards is because it was every 3 months, every quarter. And so that's where the name cue card came from. And so it did a few things, right? It did, it gave us our fuel price. So it would either go up or down on the track up here, go up or down. And if it couldn't, like if it was here and it said to go down, then you would just set it to 3, right? And then the next thing it had was the grant. And I think you had mentioned it earlier when you were talking about this investor's action, is you can either gain your funding or you can accept grant. And so the first player, and only one player each round, could accept the grant. And you would take this token, place it down here. And so each grant was worth a certain amount of money and had certain criteria. So it was like this one was, in order to accept grant, you must have constructed at least 2 buildings or developments. And so if you had reached that, you could claim the grant. Excuse me. And
yes. So, and what we found with that is that it was never terribly surprising. It was just like who
can tried to lean into it at some point to make it like a catch-up mechanic. Like I think either some of these or some in later versions were like if you have the least, or if you know, but sometimes a lot of those classifiers weren't pointing towards the loser of the game. It was just like in that one area, you know. So it was hard to balance.
Right. Or it was something that everyone had already done. And then it was like, okay, well, who's first player?
You must have invented zero tech. You must have.
Yeah, that's terrible.
You must have the least fuel on hand. Like it's interesting, but it's like. Again, it doesn't like add to the gameplay. You know, it's just like, oh, if you happen to have the least fuel, go there and get 6 million. You know. Now the launch was cool, right? Because it just had, you know, cloudy. So every time you launched, it would be an extra fuel, or it was crowded, so you had to spend extra food, or it was normal, or whatever. And then why don't you talk to us about the food drive here?
Yeah, so the food drive was largely our way, because you can see there are other places where oxygen and fuel get spent, like the testing zone. In a later version, the hiring department, you could supplement with oxygen and fuel, because we were thinking, well, kind of like going on a training mission. The food did not have an extra cost. So what we did is at the end of each round, we would bid for the first player marker. And the bid was spending food. And I'm trying to remember, was it just once around the table, or could you just continue
it was once around the table. So like, if there were 3 of us, I would go and I would say, I'm going to donate 2 food. And you would go, and you could either donate 0 or 3. And then the next player could either donate, if you donated 3, they could donate 0 or 4. And so basically the last player in turn order had the biggest advantage to taking first player, but they would have to spend the most food.
And then everyone though had to
yeah, because like you're donating the food is what you were doing, and the person who donated the most became first player and got this reward, which is a food in this case.
Which was a food. Yeah. In theory, we thought it was a great idea.
Yeah. It helped with the food problem.
It did. But what we found is it was last player could almost always get it.
Yeah. It was
Or if your food was depleted,
there was
you
a
had
lot of
to pass.
You just had 0 food, so it was like, well, I guess I'm not charitable. So yeah, so that was that. And then we'll hit the staff meeting real quick and call it. I know this video's gone on a little longer than the other one, but hopefully you've enjoyed and seen what this game has been. So our staff meeting, it was a really cool part of the game. It stayed for a bit. I don't think it lasted too long. Sure, we'll obviously find out. But here, so we would reveal the cue card, we would update the waiting list, move the guests down, the dice down, then we'd conduct a staff meeting. So everybody would get to choose one of these options. So you could pay $3 million for an intern. That was just like an extra worker over here. Non-player colored, that was just last for the round. So kind of like, there's like an extra worker in viticulture, right, that you can get if you select.
Yeah, it's like if you go last in player order, you get that seasonal worker.
You could pay $3 million to hire a previous intern. So if you had taken an intern previously, you could now hire them for 3. So it basically costs you 6 instead of 5 for a new worker.
Yes, and I think you did just switch them,
just
like,
took-
and you just
took
like
your
switched
own
them
color.
out with a.
So basically,
Your
it was
own
like
color,
it
yeah.
cost you more but less, spread out, right?
Yes.
The next one was look at the next cue card, which was quite interesting. Like that was a fun one, right? Because you could see the next fuel price, so you knew next round if it was going to go up or down. So you knew when to buy.
Mm-hmm.
You also knew the grant. So if you knew next round the grant was like have this accomplished, you could work towards it, right?
Mm-hmm. It often became very obvious that was one of the better options. Like the intern was nice if you wanted an
And if
extra
you had the
action
money.
that round, and if you had the money. But looking at the next cue card was almost always the best
Right.
option,
Yeah.
I think.
And then we had discard draw. And I think that could be a shuttle segment or a fly card. You could discard 1 and draw 1.
I think
You could lock in your.
was there a hand limit? I'm sure there was probably a hand limit.
It's not listed anywhere, but it probably was made up as we were playing. So I don't know.
Sure.
You could also lock in the fuel price. So on the player board, there was this little lock token, or a fuel token, and you just moved it up here and you placed it underneath the current fuel price. And so next round, wherever this moved, it would lock it in, which would be really nice if you could see the cue card to set it, to know what it was going to be.
Or if it was down at, 1 or 2, and chances were that it was going to.
You knew it was either going to go to 3 or at least 2, so you could lock it in. Or you could just gain $2 million. So staff meeting was interesting, right? Everybody got to choose one thing to do. Some of them were fun. Like it was interesting, but it was just one of those things that really slowed the game down. Made people have another decision that they had to think about, and didn't make the game better. It was fun, but without it, the game was just as good.
Absolutely.
So any other pointers, things? Oh, we did have secret goals.
I was just about to say, there's secret goals up here. I don't know when they were distributed.
Just look at a couple here.
And there's only 6 of them, so I don't know if we did a draw.
They will reveal as soon as you. Oh yeah. Some said reveal when complete, and obviously this one obviously would, I guess, be at the end of the game. So we did have secret goals. So a lot of the game existed here, right? Like we had the shuttle building, the cockpit, the engine, the segments. We had the player board with the resources and the developments. We had some type of waiting list with guests. Had secret goals. We had technology cards that you could build on that other players could use. There was it had the bones,
It had the bones for sure.
But it was literally just a scary skeleton.
It was
needed
indeed.
some veins, some blood, some life. Needed some life.
And we gave it some life
with the help of a lot of people. a lot of people.
We
helped.
did.
So I'm curious if you
because outside of us, who was the first person to play test?
I don't want to take up more time for this video, but in our next video, we'll try and revisit potentially who played that version. I wish we'd kept track of what version we played for each playtest. That would be something that would have been cool to know. Obviously, people who watch this can comment and let us know. If you happen to play this version.
Yeah, we at least know for this version it was just us.
And then we fixed some things.
Just set.
So thanks so much for watching. This has been a development dive into Galactic Cruise, the very first version. Of course, this was a 2-part series, so if you just got this video, make sure you go back and watch the first one. We kind of walked through the whole game, so this is probably maybe a little longer than a lot of the other videos will be, because from this point on, it'll be small changes from this. Of course, there are some big steps, as I'm sure some of you who have played it or have seen the finished version of the game know, a lot changes. So yeah, hope you stick around and continue to watch through this series and go on this journey with us of the development of Galactic Cruise. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching.